The silence after the damage is always the loudest. That's where you begin, standing in the ruins of the man you once knew, staring at the pieces of someone who didn't just fall, he was pushed. And the world thinks it understands what that does to someone. It thinks it knows what breaking a man creates, but it doesn't. It can't. Because only the one who's been shattered knows the shape of the monster that crawls out of the cracks. The core message is simple but powerful. Breaking someone does not end them. It awakens a version of them that is stronger, sharper, and beyond the reach of the person who caused the damage. When someone is pushed to their limits, especially emotionally, the world expects them to stay shattered. It expects them to remain soft, apologetic, desperate for validation, but pain never leaves a person the same. It forces them to confront who they were, who they pretended to be, and who they must become to survive. And survival changes a human being in ways comfort never will. The keynote is the transformation that happens after being broken. The evolution from vulnerability to power. When someone reaches the point where they have nothing left to lose, something inside them shifts permanently. They no longer fear disappointment. They no longer chase approval. They no longer bend to expectations that never served them. Instead, they develop clarity. They begin making decisions based on strength instead of emotion. They stop waiting to be chosen and start choosing themselves. That shift is the true rebirth. Being broken strips away illusions. It exposes how people really are, what the world truly values, and how easily loyalty can vanish. And once someone sees this truth, they stop living blind. They become strategic. They become self-reliant. They become a force built from scars rather than smiles. The pain becomes fuel. The betrayal becomes blueprint. The silence becomes space to rebuild. What emerges from that rebuilding is not a damaged version. It's a refined one. This transformation is not about revenge. It's not about proving anything to the one who caused the pain. It's about realizing that the person who rises after the fall is no longer the person who trusted too deeply or cared too easily. They now understand their worth, their power, and their capability. The evolution makes them untouchable because they are no longer controlled by fear, guilt, or the desire to please. That is the keynote. Breaking someone does not destroy them. It reveals their real strength. And once that strength awakens, the world can no longer use the same weapons against them. They become someone who cannot be manipulated, cannot be diminished, and cannot be broken the same way again. Pain may have started the transformation, but power finishes it. The second keynote is the realization that once someone stops needing others for validation, the people who once had power over them lose it instantly. Human beings are often controlled not by force, but by attachment, by wanting to be accepted, wanted, understood, or chosen. When someone still hopes for approval, they bend, they compromise. They silence parts of themselves just to keep certain people close. But the moment they stop needing that approval, a profound internal freedom is born, and that freedom is what makes them unstoppable. When a person is broken deeply enough, they eventually learn that relying on others to define their worth is the fastest path to disappointment. They notice how loyalty is conditional, how affection shifts with convenience, and how quickly people retreat when things aren't easy. It's painful, but it's clarifying. This clarity strips away emotional dependency and exposes the truth. The only person who needs to choose you is you. Once that lesson sinks in, the fear of losing people disappears because they understand they cannot lose what was never truly theirs. That detachment is not coldness, it is emotional evolution. This keynote emphasizes the transformation from external validation to internal authority. When a person learns to stand without support, they begin making decisions based on what's right for them, not what will impress or satisfy someone else. Their voice becomes firmer, their boundaries sharper, and their choices driven by purpose rather than fear. They no longer shrink themselves to fit into someone else's comfort. They no longer chase people who walked away. They no longer plead for space in lives that never made room for them. They become self-defined, and once someone reaches that level of self-possession, those who once manipulated or controlled them find themselves powerless. You cannot intimidate someone who no longer fears being alone. You cannot guilt someone who no longer depends on your approval. You cannot break someone who has rebuilt themselves from the ruins you left behind. This inner freedom becomes their armor, their clarity, their strength. The second keynote is this truth: emotional independence is the ultimate power. When a person stops needing others to validate their existence, they rise above manipulation, abandonment, and disappointment. They become a force shaped not by what was done to them, but by what they chose to become. And once they reach that point, no one can ever own their peace, their direction, or their destiny again. The third keynote is the truth that pain is not just something you survive. It becomes the blueprint for the stronger version of you that follows. When someone is broken, the world expects them to crumble, to stay small, to carry the wound like a burden. But wounds have a way of teaching lessons comfort never could. Pain sharpens perception. It forces you to see the real intentions behind people's actions, the fragility of trust, and the necessity of building a life that doesn't collapse when someone else walks away. It reveals what matters and what never did. Pain becomes a form of education. It teaches you where you placed your energy and where it was wasted. It teaches you who cared genuinely and who cared only when it was convenient. It teaches you the difference between attachment and connection, between being valued and being used. Every heartbreak, betrayal, and disappointment becomes a chapter in the manual of who you are becoming. And those lessons are not gentle. They are carved deep, they are unforgettable, and they change you permanently. The third keynote is about embracing this transformation instead of fearing it. Pain does not simply reshape you, it refines you. It trims away the parts of you that tolerated disrespect, ignored red flags, or trusted without discernment. It reduces you to your strongest form. Like steel tempered in fire, you emerge harder, clearer, and more resistant to the storms that once overwhelmed you. You start to understand that resilience is not the absence of suffering, but the mastery of what that suffering created within you. You begin to recognize patterns, not people. You stop repeating cycles that once trapped you. You stop giving your heart to situations that never deserved it. That awareness is the true reward of pain. It gives you vision. It gives you instinct. It gives you wisdom you couldn't have earned through ease. The very experiences that once destroyed you become the armor that protects you and the compass that guides you. In this keynote, the message is clear: pain is not just a scar. It is structure. It is the architecture of your new identity. It does not weaken you. It completes you. And when you finally understand that every wound was shaping you into someone stronger, someone wiser, someone untouchable, you stop seeing your past as ruin and start seeing it as the foundation of the person you were always meant to become. The fourth keynote is the realization that once someone rises from being broken, they never rise the same. They rise with a clarity and calmness that cannot be shaken. This isn't the loud, aggressive kind of strength people imagine. It's the quiet, controlled, almost unsettling kind of power that comes from surviving what should have destroyed you. When a person goes through deep emotional devastation and rebuilds themselves, they develop an internal stability that no one can easily touch again. They stop reacting impulsively. They stop explaining themselves unnecessarily. They stop wasting energy on people who drain rather than support them. This calmness is not weakness, it is mastery. The fourth keynote emphasizes that true strength is not found in shouting or proving anything. It's found in the silence after you've learned the truth about your own resilience. When someone climbs out of their lowest point, they carry with them a new understanding of how much they can endure. They've already walked through fire. They've already been brought to their knees. They've already faced the worst someone could do to them. And when you've survived that, everyday disappointments lose their power. Manipulation loses its grip. Fear loses its voice. This calmness is the kind of presence that unsettles those who once had control. They expect you to react the way you used to, emotionally, desperately, vulnerably. But instead, you move with deliberate intention. You think before you speak. You choose before you commit. You let people fall out of your life without chasing them, because you've learned that anyone who truly wants to stay, stays without requiring your pain as proof. This keynote highlights that rising after being broken creates emotional maturity that cannot be fabricated. You understand the difference between peace and numbness. You recognize the value of boundaries. You prioritize your well-being over validation. And you learn that silence is not a sign of defeat, but a strategy of power. Your calmness becomes your advantage. It protects your energy, guards your focus, and keeps you aligned with your purpose. The fourth keynote is this: surviving heartbreak refines your soul into something unshakable. You move differently because you finally understand your worth. You speak differently because you no longer fear losing anyone. You think differently because you've learned the cost of giving yourself away too easily. This version of you doesn't beg, doesn't chase, and doesn't break the same way again. The calm is your transformation and your warning. The fifth keynote is the truth that the version of you who rises from pain is not merely rebuilt. You are reborn with a direction that no longer bends for others. Once someone has been broken and rebuilt themselves from the ground up, they no longer seek to return to who they used to be. That old version of them carried the wounds, the fears, the dependence on others, the need to be chosen. But the new version is forged through clarity and fire. They understand that their life cannot be shaped by the hands that once shattered them. They become their own architect, their own guide, their own force. This keynote is about ownership, owning your path, your power, and your future without waiting for anyone's permission. When someone rises from deep pain, they stop living reactively. They stop allowing the world to push them in random directions. Instead, they start moving with intention. Every choice becomes deliberate. Every step becomes purposeful. They know exactly what they will tolerate and what they won't. They know what energy deserves their presence and what behavior deserves their silence. This is the transformation that happens when someone understands their worth not as something fragile, but as something earned through survival. The fifth keynote is also a reminder that not everyone gets access to the new version of you. The people who helped you fall, the ones who ignored the damage, caused it, or walked away, are not invited into the life you build after rising. You do not owe them forgiveness, access, or explanation. Pain becomes the filter that sorts out who belongs in your next chapter and who belongs only in your memory. This isn't vengeance. It's evolution. The new you is too focused, too aware, too elevated to allow the same patterns to repeat. You also gain a different kind of ambition. One that doesn't depend on impressing others. It comes from the hunger created by loss, the determination born from betrayal, and the discipline built in solitude. You no longer chase validation, you chase purpose. You no longer fear being alone, you fear wasting your potential. This mindset makes you unstoppable because you no longer hesitate. You no longer shrink. You no longer hand over your power to people who don't know what to do with it. The fifth keynote is ultimately about forward motion, rising in a direction that honors the strength you discovered within yourself. You don't go back to who you were. You go forward into who you were meant to be. Pain didn't define you, it refined you. And now, the world meets a version of you that is controlled, intentional, and entirely self-made. The sixth keynote is the understanding that once someone has survived deep emotional destruction, they gain a form of vision that cannot be unlearned, a heightened awareness of people, patterns, and intentions. Pain sharpens perception. It teaches you to see beyond words and into actions, beyond promises and into consistency, beyond charm and into character. This keynote is about the awakening of intuition, the internal radar that develops after someone has been broken and forced to rebuild themselves with clarity instead of hope. It's the realization that the very experiences that once wounded you now protect you. When someone goes through heartbreak, betrayal, or abandonment, they start noticing the small signs they once ignored. They recognize red flags before they turn into disasters. They understand emotional manipulation, not because they studied it, but because they lived through it. They become harder to fool, harder to deceive, harder to influence. This doesn't make them distrustful. It makes them discerning. They stop giving their energy away without evaluation. They stop letting people into their life without understanding their motives. This is not paranoia. It is wisdom carved from survival. The sixth keynote emphasizes that this sharpened intuition becomes one of your greatest strengths. It protects your boundaries. It helps you choose better relationships, better decisions, better paths. It prevents you from falling into the same cycles that once drained your spirit. You begin to see people as they truly are, not as who you wish they could be. You stop romanticizing potential and start valuing patterns. You stop investing in promises and start measuring actions. This clarity is what saves you from future heartbreaks and unnecessary suffering. There is also a quiet confidence that comes with this vision. You no longer fear losing people who show signs of disloyalty or inconsistency, because you understand that holding on to the wrong person is far more damaging than letting them go. You recognize that peace is better than chaos disguised as love, and solitude is better than company that tears you apart. The intuition you gain becomes your compass, and it guides you toward relationships and environments that nurture your growth rather than sabotage it. The sixth keynote is the truth that pain opens your eyes. It doesn't just change how you feel, it changes how you see. Once you've been broken and rebuilt, you navigate the world with a deeper awareness, a sharper instinct, and a wiser heart. This vision protects you, strengthens you, and elevates you, ensuring that the same darkness that once broke you will never break you again.